There is a tank off going to the AFC South, and Tennessee Titans are leading the charge. Maybe. We'll be talking about that and so much more on this edition of the Morning Glory Show. If you are checking us out for the first time or a repeat customer, salutations. Do us a couple favors. Head over to the Glory Day Sports YouTube channel and subscribe so you can join us every Thursday morning live and hop in this comment section. But also, enter into the chance to win a signed Tajay Spears jersey giveaway, who practiced yesterday and should be practicing or playing potentially this Sunday. If you're one of our audio only or Spotify, Apple listeners, make sure you leave us a 5-star review. And lastly, if you're over on Twitter /X, make sure you hit that retweet button on this video. We appreciate it. But as always, I am joined by one of my amazing co-hosts, as always, Jonathan Miller at Esports Valen. How are you doing today, Jonathan?
Good. All things considered. Yeah, I think my mood has flipped at this point in the season where 1-6 doesn't feel so bad because it feels like there's a purpose, and that's to get to the quarterback. So who knows? It'll be an interesting conversation today to talk about, kind of what the future of this team is, what it should be, where they can go, which is down. But this week is going to be an interesting one because the Titans are playing against a team that they should beat, which could have weird implications. So, yeah.
That was actually one of my first questions for you is, how are you viewing these Sundays going forward? What are your game day plans? I know early in the season we are super invested. We're like, hey, let's get this dub, boys. And it's kind of shifted with that. I mean, I know a lot of fans are just cheering for the tank, get that number one pick, like Amar in the comic sections, tank for that number one pick. And then Shador Sanders, Chris Frazier, obviously very similar thought concept. I think there's still a lot to learn with this Brian Callahan team moving forward through that this season. And we're still learning about Will Levis and Mason Rudolph and this team in general. But what are your Sunday plans? Are you just cooking, watching the game, or are you drinking the beer and just diving in? Personally, me last week, I watched about that first half and I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to the gym. We'll check up on this game afterwards. But what are you doing on your Sundays currently?
Well, I'm a degenerate and I watch every single snap, even when things are not going well. And it's mostly because I kind of want to evaluate the team myself with my own eyes. But honestly, for me, obviously had high hopes going into the season. I think I had us winning 10 or 11 games. I think it was 10 games. That's not happening for the Tennessee Titans. Now, technically, still possible, right? But that's not happening. Let's be honest. Now, what I will say is that you have to do one of two things. You're either competitive or you're not. This team is not competitive right now. So for me, I'm okay with tanking for Shador. Like, that's just where I'm at. And I will say I've started the quarterback evaluating process. I've started looking at these guys a little bit more closely. And I'm pretty firm that this class is pretty awful for a franchise guy. There's a ton of projects in this class. There's a ton of guys who should probably just return to school and continue to develop. But there's two guys at the top of the class that I think everybody would agree on. That's Shador and Cam Ward. But for me, there's only one guy that's a bona fide franchise guy. He's got it. He's got all the traits, and that's Shador Sanders. So to me, it's like a Shador or bust situation in the draft because the Titans can't draft another developmental quarterback. They can't. So, that's kind of the quarterback purgatory that the Titans have been in. They have a developmental quarterback and he's not developing. So you need a guy who's just the guy. Now, it's not to say that Shador's not going to have things that he needs to, improve on and develop at the next level. He most definitely will, right? But I think the benefit right now for the Titans is that you're in a really strange situation, and one of two things are going to happen through the rest of the season. Either Will Levis is going to find his stride at some point in these next 10 to 11 games, I forget what it is, and then it's going to click for him, and then it's like, okay, cool. Titans at that point will certainly still be picking in the top 10. Then you can get, maybe one of these stud receivers. There's 2 or 3 receivers at the top of this draft that are pretty darn good. There's 1 or 2 offensive linemen that are pretty darn good. And then there's a couple of edge rushers that are pretty darn good too, that certainly be able to land in the top 10. So even if the Titans flatten out a little bit, there's still a chance that they're still going to get a good player and they'll be okay because they'll have their quarterback at that point. And if not, then hopefully they're bad enough to where they're picking in the top 2, because if it's Travis Hunter versus a quarterback and you get a team that, let's say it's the Panthers and they still want to stick with Bryce, as long as it's a team that's not drafting a quarterback, then the Titans are good. But yeah, it's strange. Now those are the 2 outcomes that should happen. The third outcome that is possible and feels oh so probable because of who we are is the Titans and Will Levis are good enough just in enough games. They're competitive in let's say half of the remaining games, and Will finds a way to win those games, and he even plays well. Let's say he even plays well. Then what? You're sitting at 4, 5, 6 wins on the season. That bumps you to right now is crazy because there's so many 2-win teams, but that probably bumps you to the 7th or 8th or 9th pick, something like that, right? Then what? You have a quarterback that you think is the guy. You don't really have like a great evaluation. He had like 5 or 6 good games in an entire season. He still missed games. Then what? This is not a better situation. So hopefully, even if that does happen for Titans fans, the one thing would be, okay, there's not going to be a new bridge quarterback. It's going to be Will Levis is the bridge. You get another year of Will Levis. You continue to build around him and you hope he puts it together. That sounds terrifying to me. Awful, right? That's not a solution. Because you're just uncertain. So I'm just hoping for one of the other extremes. Either we are the worst team and we go get Shador, which sounds more exciting to me personally, or Will he figures it out Sunday. You know what I'm saying? And he stays figuring it out. I think that's far less likely.
Yeah, this game this week might define this season for the Titans, and it can go really either way. With Will Levis coming out, maybe he shows out and they get the dub. It could drop them down this draft board, and it might be a cause of change in that locker room. And maybe they put a couple other wins down the stretch together. Let's hop into these comments just a little bit because we got a decent amount of them. Stevie saying, tighten up, Stevie. And he says that is nerve wracking just in regards to Will Levis actually coming out and playing well and just entering into this purgatory even further. Chris Frazier saying, you can't think, you got to know, which I 100% agree. That was the entire objective of this season. Know if Will Levis is the guy or not. And at this point in time, it's still up in the air. It could go either way, which is, it is so terrifying at this point. Amar saying, I heard the Raiders want him to rumor is if they might hire Dean as head coach to lure Shador to the Raiders. I think the Raiders is a good fit for Shador, and I've heard a couple analysts actually bring that up. Obviously, we are tank for Shador here on this podcast. That is our guy as of right now. Cam Ward, not super sold on him. I still have to dive much deeper into this QB evaluation. Right now, I'm focused on running backs and linebackers. I'll actually be on NFL Draft Fanatics this Saturday for the next month or so, talking about those. So definitely hop over to their YouTube channel as well and join us in those comments. I think we'll be going live Saturday morning.
Do you want me to give you a quick evaluation, like everything that I've watched so far?
Yeah, let's go.
So here's just really quickly. Obviously, we are going to have months to talk about this, and this will be the topic of so many shows. And the season's not over, so some of these guys still have more football to play. A lot of you guys have seen. Like, I don't have to go into the situation with Shador Sanders. Like, he checks all the boxes. He's both mobile, he's pocket friendly, he understands. More importantly than anything, he does a really good job in pre-snap. He does a great job in post-snap. He gets through his reads. He's a cerebral quarterback in that way. And then he has all the physical traits. So basically everything that Will Levis is not, essentially, for lack of a better evaluation, right? So Shador is the obvious pick here. But Cam, I keep hearing a lot of people say they really like Cam Ward over him. And I think the reason why that is because Cam Ward is fantastic when the play is broken down. The problem is that half of the time Cam Ward breaks the play down himself. He's the reason why the play is getting extended. There are many times where he could sit in the pocket, deliver a ball, and he chooses not to. Now, where he's amazing is getting off platform, getting out of structure, and throwing these absolute just beautiful off platform, throwing off his back foot, darts into, tight coverage. And so his big playability is really high, and he's really great on the run. Obviously, he's a very mobile. But where I struggle is that at the next level, having him play in structure. So essentially, if you plugged Cam Ward into this Titans offense, he would be struggling the same as Will Levis in many ways, because it's very structured. There's a lot of nuance to it. And for Cam, he's like Patrick Mahomes on steroids, where it's like, okay, let's get him out of the pocket and do some crazy stuff. And that's cool. But I haven't seen enough of him playing in structure through off. Like, when you watch him, you're like, this guy is an exciting college quarterback. Very exciting, very good. But when I watch him, I don't think this guy is he's a good NFL quarterback. Those two things are just not mixing right now for me. So that's what I've gotten so far in my evaluation. I haven't even watched previous years, right? Like, I'm just going off of this year that I'm watching. So we'll see. There's more to evaluate there. But for me, while Cam Ward has really high upside, the problem is that his floor is really low also. Whereas the floor on Shador is much higher, because he is just a much better play within structure. I mean, you got to think, this guy has an NFL offensive coordinator as well. His father is one of the greatest corners to ever play the game. He's been around the NFL for he's been around like pro level football for a long time. This kid he's indoctrinated. Like, he's perfect. He was made for this type of thing. Right. So while I don't love his, I don't know what you want to call it, sass, swagger, I don't know, however you want to label it. While I don't love how it's looked recently, I love the player, and I think that I think he's going to be a professional, and it's going to be fine. But yeah, if you either tank for Shador, you're either bad enough for him, or you basically have to go into next year with Will Levis or another bridge, which everyone's talking about Arch Manning, and like they're trying to project to these other quarterback classes. Arch is probably not. We're not going to see him till like 2027, most likely, right? Like, he's going to stay in school. So if you take Arch out of the equation, you take it. By the way, it might be the same thing for Nico. So you take Arch out of the equation, you take Nico out of the equation, and then what? You have the same thing we're working with currently, right? So like, it's really dangerous to say we should trade our picks, or we should look at 2026 or 2027 and like, the Titans don't have that luxury. We can't draft another developmental quarterback. So you can't get a guy in the third round, Drew Allar or whoever. Like, you can't go, well, this guy, like Carson Beck in the fourth would be good. And then we could, like, the Titans can't do that. We can't afford a project anymore. It's got to be the guy, or Kirk Cousins or somebody who is like a proven bridge, but we just did that with Ryan Tannehill.
Mm-hmm.
There is really one option, and his name starts with a sh and ends with a door for some reason is how it's pronounced. Okay. So that's it in my eyes. It's either Shador Sanders or Will Levis. It's one of those two. And it's certainly not looking like Will Levis. So that's where we're at.
I think there's two thought concepts behind this. You either draft the quarterback and build around him, or you build the team and then you draft the quarterback. The issue with the latter is I don't think Amy's going to be patient enough with this team to allow this when we're building this new stadium and we need these season ticket holders. We need asses and seats at this new place. I don't think that sells in the future. And there's already fans that are already out on this team going forward already because of what we've already seen. So
well, here's the thing with that logic though, too, because I think Tic Tac Titan, Tyler Rowland, he mentioned that concept too. The only problem with that is that you currently, like, situationally, right? I understand, like, in logic that makes sense. It's like build around the team and then get the guy, right? Like the Atlanta Falcons are basically doing that right now. It's like Kirk Cousins, and then you have Michael Penix sitting in the wing, waiting in the wings. The same thing that was also the Green Bay Packers strategy. You draft Jordan Love, he sits, he develops behind your bona fide franchise guy, then boom, he's ready, right? In theory, that's the franchise doing right by the player, if we're being honest. But right now, the Titans are in a different situation. They are 1-6, and they are looking at a very tough end of their schedule. They have the Texans twice. They still have the Commanders, who have looked amazing. They still have the Vikings, who have looked amazing. They still have the Colts again, who have been hyper competitive, and looks like Flacco's probably going to, be the guy for them that makes him really good. So there are a lot of really challenging games still on this schedule. And we looked at it last week. I think the best case scenario is the Titans maybe have 2, maybe 3 more wins on the schedule. And that's assuming they beat the Patriots on Sunday, which who knows? That's not a guarantee. So the problem with the building and then drafting the guy later is that the Titans have spent too long without the guy. Ryan Tannehill has been the only guy outside of Mariota for a couple of seasons in the past nearly decade where the team's been like, okay, we have our guy. We have a guy that we can be competitive with. So you're sitting at 1-6. You have this season is lost. You're not going to do anything significant here. So there's really only one option, and that's to hedge your bets at the quarterback position. And you either go for, you're literally sitting in the second spot right now. There's realistically only 2 other teams in the NFL right now that can be considered as bad as the Titans, and you're about to play one of them. And so if you lose this game on Sunday, it's get your water wings, boys and girls, because we're going to be tanking and we're in the water. We're going to the bottom. So, which is a good thing, because at this point, if the Titans, here's the difference, Jake, is that if we were sitting at like 3-4 or something along those lines, if we were sitting at 2 or 3 wins and we were like in the realm of possibility of competitive, then this is a different conversation, because you're not really in the Shador sweepstakes at that point. We are in the Shador sweepstakes. We are in the number 1 overall pick sweepstakes. And when you have at least one guy who is going to be a bona fide franchise player, which is what Shador Sanders is, and you have that need at quarterback, and you could potentially land that guy going into your new stadium and having the guy, that has to be the focus. It absolutely has to be. Like Callahan just had his presser where he said, like, absolutely not. We're trying to tank. Like, if you've been in any NFL locker room, he said all the things he was supposed to say. Of course, the coach and of course the players are never going to admit that that's the plan, but they are 1,000,000% having that conversation in the front office right now. Brian Callahan, Chad Brinker, Miss Amy, Callie, they are all having the conversation of, okay, this is reality. This is what we're looking at. Okay. And by the way, Callahan already tipped his hand. He already told us too much, because he told us right before, I want to say it was like Monday, we got a quote that literally said, in regards to the quarterbacks, Teron Davenport reported, it was a direct quote, something along the lines of, as far as the quarterback situation goes, we kind of know where we're going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It was like, so he already said, like, look, we know what the quarterback situation is. Okay, well, if we're 1-6, you kind of know what it's going to be. So they've already told us that they're preparing for this. So I promise you, if we see another trade before Sunday, or if we see a trade by Monday or Tuesday, I believe the deadline is Wednesday. If we see a trade of any significance at any point before next Wednesday, they've told us what they're going to tell us. And I promise you, if we lose at home to the Patriots, some stuff is going to happen. But it should, because at 1-7, I mean, but losing, I'm telling you right now, if the Titans can lose to the Patriots, then I mean that it's going to be us or Carolina with the number 1 pick.
Yep.
And I think Carolina's probably going to find a way to win a couple more games.
It'll be interesting to see what Carolina does if they do acquire that say they're number 1 of the draft, we're number 2. Bryce Young back into the starting guard. It'll be very intriguing to see if they move on from him and decide to draft a Shador or Cam Ward. And then what do the Titans do? Because that's a realistic situation at this point in time. Stevie in the comments has a great question for us. If my computer didn't just fry, there we go. He said, hate to say it, but I would trade Pollard to secure the tank. Obviously, we just brought in Tony Pollard this previous offseason as a free agent. I believe he's on a 2 to maybe 3-year deal. I personally, if there's a trade on the table, you're not going to get a lot for Tony Pollard, honestly. You're going to get a potential 6th, 7th round pick, maybe a 5th round swap with somebody. But I would tend to agree. I would trade Tony Pollard if there is something on the table. We know Tajay Spears is coming back from the hamstring. Hopefully he's back out there this week. And then if he's not, you're getting the Julius Chestnut show, and I'd be fine with that as well. Would you move on from any of these guys, Tony Pollard, Harold Landry? Obviously, we talked about Diggs last week as well. Is there anybody that's really just throwing off your radar? I would definitely move on from this cat.
I'm in agreement that trading more assets is the way to go to secure the tank. I agree. So here's the best part. When you trade players, in this situation, you can, without saying it and without admitting it, make your team worse to secure losing. And that's something that would never come from anyone's mouth in the organization. No one ever will ever publicly say that. But it's the best way to do it without having to admit it. So, yes, I agree. I think Rand is probably pounding the phones right now. I wouldn't trade Tony Pollard. I think that you still want to keep your pieces that are good players, and there's still a ton of good players on this team. Tony is also just kind of a good teammate. Like the way he's speaking, like you're not getting like the kind of like passive aggressive comments like Arden Key is giving, and how like the way Jeffrey Simmons is talking, and like some of the way that the other players are talking is really uncomfortable. You're not getting that from Tony Pollard. Like Tony he's locked in. He wants to be.
He's a Memphis cat. I mean, he's a local
he wants
kid.
to be a Titan, and he's good. He's been fantastic. So to me, Pollard is not necessarily like running backs don't jump off the page as like, oh, this is a valuable trade chip. They come, a dime a dozen. So what I would say is the Titans should be trading. And I'm going to say something that, I don't think you guys agree with, but I'd be fine with Jeffrey Simmons being on the trade block. Literally everyone is for sale, minus the guys that you obviously can't move, like Snead and Calvin, because of the contract situation. Those contracts are not easy to move. So those guys aren't available, but Harold Landry, I think, makes a ton of sense. Sebastian Joseph Day makes a ton of sense as a trade chip. Tyler Boyd, as much as I would love to keep him, I think he's also a team first guy. He's really, really good locker room guy, glue guy for sure. So I would hate to lose him, but Tyler Boyd could make some sense to a team trying to be competitive. He's a really good receiver. And again, it would be a day 3 pick, but it would be more assets, more draft capital that Rand could add. But to me, like a Harold Landry, or like a defensive piece that is a good player, it's not necessarily about acquiring the particular asset, but it's more about just getting worse without having to admit that you're wanting to get worse. So yes, I would find a trade piece and I would send another player, maybe like Harold Landry to Detroit makes a ton of sense.
100%.
Now Arden Key showed out in that game. So who knows? Either way, again, it doesn't necessarily matter about the capital. Adding, like, if we could add a third round pick, that'd be fantastic. I think Harold Landry could fetch a third. But yeah, if you wanted any more of a clear signal, it'd be trading your best pass rushing piece on a team that has like no edge rushers, right? So
Yeah.
I do think one is coming. It might wait until after the Patriots game. I promise you, if they lose, they're gonna sell a player, and then that'll be that. But they have a balancing act to do, because they have to put up this facade that they're trying to win games, and they're gonna find a couple games to win. I don't think the Titans are only gonna win one game, but man, I've never wanted the Titans to lose more in a week, and it's going to be challenging because this is not a good football team they're playing. And it's, if there's any wins left on the schedule, it's this one. So we'll see. But if they lose, the implications there are, if the Titans find a way to lose against the Patriots, I mean, you basically all but secure a bottom 3 pick, like just locked in basically, because not only would you have the win-loss over the Patriots, but the Patriots have a tiebreaker because they beat the Jets and we lost to the Jets. So that would be super interesting. But yeah, honestly, it'll be the only time in Titans history that I can think of where we lost, and I'm like, yes, I'm like legitimately rooting for the loss. So it might be fun. It might be a fun way to watch Titans football this weekend, is be like, yes, let's lose.
Well, I think it goes even deeper than that. Obviously, we're looking at that end score, and that's going to make a big difference. And I think we're both in agreement that we're looking for that L. But it's, what do they look like on the trajectory to that L at the very end? Do you see progression from Will Levis? Do you see JC Latham showing out? Do you see these young pieces playing better down the stretch? Is probably the biggest thing. And if they squeak out a win or two, that's going to be perfectly fine with me, especially if these young guys are showing out. Hopping into the AFC South, we've had some movement across this board as well, because the Titans, they're probably the worst team in the NFL outside of the Panthers, but there is 2 other teams in the AFC South that are definitely pushing with that, and that's Jacksonville and Indianapolis. Jacksonville obviously just traded Cam Robinson. They traded him and a 7th, potentially, depending on playing time, for a 5th that could become a 4th. Yeah. A lot of the times you don't see starting offensive left tackles go via trade anywhere.
And he wasn't a bad player either.
Like, no, he did get benched this last week for Walker Little, who did not play well. Former 2nd round pick in 2021, I believe. So they, I think, are kind of folding their hand as well and looking towards the future. They do obviously have Anton Harrison on the roster as well, who's currently playing right tackle for him, but played left tackle for Oklahoma, another 2nd round pick. Maybe they drafted him first, I don't remember. But definitely some pieces they can play around with there. But it's hard to see somebody moving on from a player like that. And they still paid him. They took the pay of his salary before they traded him. And I think Minnesota is just paying him like a couple mil this season. And then obviously the Colts just been Anthony Richardson this week, which I feel like they're in a similar boat to the Titans. They're just in that time warp later in the year to where, I mean, Joe Flacco is Mason Rudolph at this point in time for him. And the biggest thing for Anthony Richardson is he hasn't played a lot. He hasn't gotten the snaps, and he is still very young, 22 years old, youngest quarterback in the AFC South, maybe in the AFC at this point in time. I think he might be younger than who is in the NFC. But yeah, this is an interesting AFC South going forward for us, and it's really Houston and the others.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, the AFC South is. What's funny is that it's maybe not as in shambles as we're saying it is for the Colts. It's just their quarterback situation is the same as us, which
Mhm.
we said the entire offseason, like why is Anthony Richardson so hyped? What has he done to prove that? And then sure enough, like here we are. But yeah, I mean the Colts are a 5-win team, aren't they? Aren't they like 5-3, something like that, right?
I don't have
Yeah.
it in
So
front
like
of me, but
if they would have if they would have beat the Texans, then they would have been leading the division. So like the Texans and the Colts, like whatever. Like I think the Colts are kind of like fake good, to be honest. Like they'll be every bit of an 8 or 9 win team this year, I think. But who knows? Like if Flacco's the guy and they're just gonna do the whole like again, like the Atlanta, have a bridge, let your young guys sit and learn type of thing. Which by the way, last week I was advocating for the trade for Matthew Stafford. And then the Titans would be doing the same thing by sitting Will Levis and letting him develop. By the way, that's still an option. So, if the tank is unsuccessful, because Will is half competitive and accidentally wins too many games to get you a bottom 3 pick or whatever, then the option is that you go, okay, Will, you could be the guy at some point. But we have to bring in a guy. We have to be competitive now. So we can't wait for you to whatever. So they could choose to do that. They could choose to bring in a guy and then let Will just kind of sit, which is what I think the Colts are doing. Who knows? We'll probably see Anthony Richardson again before the end of the season, and it's going to be super dysfunctional and hilarious. Because if you bench him and you're like, okay, Joe Flacco is our better option to win games, but if you start losing games and you have to put Anthony Richardson back out there, it's just such a mess. But yeah, so for us and the Jags, I mean, it feels like kind of a race to the bottom there too. But the good news is that if we accidentally beat the Jags once or twice, which again, possible, not sure that it will happen, but possible. Looks like Trevor Lawrence might be putting it together a little bit towards the back half here. But if that happens, I'm not worried about the Jacksonville Jaguars picking in front of us necessarily. They're not going to take a quarterback.
No.
They need a bunch of other things anyway. But yeah, so we'll see. This AFC South is not very competitive. It's just those two teams fighting, and the Texans have really honestly just not been playing good football, at least not to the standard that everybody crowned them at. So maybe they'll put it together later. But yeah, I mean, this division is just as dysfunctional as it's always been.
No, I completely agree, and I think it's hard for me to move on from Anthony Richardson at this point in time, unless, and I think J.J. Watt put it really well. He said, I think the only way you move away from Flacco today is if you truly believe you can win the Super Bowl this year. And I agree with that, but I also don't think the Colts agree with that. I don't think this is a Super Bowl contending team out there. So it'd be very interesting to see how this all plays out and what they do going forward, going into next year. Do you give him another shot if you can't trust him to even start now? So that'll be super interesting to me.
If you close your eyes and listen, you could say the exact same thing for Will Levis.
Exactly. So, and I mean, we've all, and all three of us and B Will, have been pretty consistent on you should start Will this season, regardless of whatever happens. I would see Anthony Richardson at the exact same of that. On going back to this team, and last week we saw the debacle in Detroit, where the special teams unit was just ransacked from beginning to end. They obviously hired Colt Anderson, bringing him in this season as a first-time special teams coordinator. If we see something similar this Sunday, do you move on from him? And at this point in time, who do you think is a better coach, Craig Aukerman or Colt Anderson?
No, you don't move off of him. It's all a part of the plan, Jake. It's losing is all a part of the plan. So yeah, Colt is a good football coach. Look, I've known him for a long time. He's a good coach. He knows what he's doing. Well, we just have to find a way to put it together. Blah, 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 blah. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Yeah. Colt's great. Yeah, cool. Yeah. We just had the arguably the worst special teams performance in our franchise's history. outside of that 59-0 loss to the Patriots in what, like 2008 or 2007, whatever it was.
Yep.
Sure, yeah, let's just go for it. Yeah, man, you can't convince me that Colt Anderson is a good coach when you're having historically bad performances with players that are mostly the same as last year. Look, like the only thing we're doing better is not fumbling punt returns. Like, Jaquan is catching them and returning them for a
Yep.
couple yards at least. That's the only thing that's gotten better from the special team side of things. Everything's gotten worse. So, no, I mean, you don't fire anyone. You keep them all. You don't fire any, not in season. There's no reason. The difference why, look, this fan base is so conditioned to fire coaches because we've had stale, bad performances offensively that we've been like, just all the coordinators, get him out of here. Outside of if your name is not Arthur Smith, get him out of here. Which, by the way, I like Matt LaFleur, but fans pitchforked him, torch and tiki torched him out of town also. But yeah, we're just so conditioned to fire coaches around here that it's like, oh, things aren't going well. Oh, get rid of him. And look, like Stoney, I don't think Stoney's in the chat this morning, but I've appreciated his takes on the coaching stuff, because the evaluation of our coaching staff, our scheme, like, yes, is Brian messing things up situationally quite a bit? He's making quite a bit of mistakes, but he's a brand new head coach. He's doing all these things for the first time for the most part. The things he's making mistakes on are things that he's new at. You know what I'm saying? Like situational play calling on the goal line, that type of thing. Like his justification for throwing the ball those 4 times on the one is like, hey, we had favorable matchups. We needed to connect on those. My thing was they ran to the weak side. All 4 of those, they threw to the weak side, all 4 of those plays, and they had one-on-one matchups on an island on the right side, like multiple times. So whatever favorable matchup they had, like Calvin one-on-one with space, to me is a favorable matchup anyways. So yeah, he's had some situational play calling stuff that's not gone very well. But outside of that, he's scheming his players open. Like the offense is working that he's put together. His scheme is operating, like the data is showing us his guys are open. Like if the ball's not getting there, then that is a player problem. So, and that's what Brian Callahan has had. So do I think that this should be a 3 or 4 win ball team at this point, even with mediocre quarterback play? Yeah, they should be, but they aren't. So no, I'm not firing any coaches mid-season. I'm not doing it. There's no need to. Even Colt, who has been awful and in every other situation, if this team was even remotely competitive, then Colt Anderson would not have a job. He'd be out of a job. Mm-hmm. But in this situation where we need to lose, like it's part of the plan, baby. Colt's great. Colt's my buddy. I throw my arm around him like this. Colt, it's okay. We'll get him next time. You got to keep him for now. Fire him after the season. Do whatever you want. But no coaches should be fired at this point in the middle of the season at all.
No, I agree. And even if it was a winning football team, obviously the special teams probably wouldn't be as bad as it was if they were actually winning games. But you can't move on from him now because it is part of the plan. You want to lose these games at this point in time.
Yep.
But even if you did move on from him, say, who are you replacing him with?
Right.
You're not going to find somebody out there at this point in time that's going to make that change. And it's not going to change anything out there, make a different outcome. I mean, you're not coaching these guys up on a week-to-week basis, and it's going to make a significant change. We have moved from the Ackerman couldn't catch a punt teams to the Colt Andersons can't block a punt teams. And then we talk about Stoney's got to get the punts off faster. And now he's got to get them off higher. And now they can't coverage down there.
That's Stonehouse's problem. Like he's like, he's kicking them too high. It's like, what's the problem here? Is the problem that he's kicking him too high, or he's line driving him to like he's kicking it in bounds, or is the problem that we're not blocking and we can't get off of our blocks, and assignment football on special teams is poor. Like it's all of those things. It was so bad. It was all of those things, but you can't tell me that that kicking the ball to Khalif Raymond, who is averaging 40 to 50 yards a return, makes sense ever. That doesn't make any sense. Guess what? There was a guy in the NFL that existed. His name was Devin Hester. You didn't kick him the ball. You kicked the ball out of bounds. What happened to that? I'm so confused. So like, yes, there's like little things in the coaching that's baked in that makes no sense. And they come to the press conference and they say, here's our justification. And it's like, that doesn't jive. Like, well, we had favorable matchups on the left side of the field, which is why we threw that. It's like, Brian, bro, look at the football field. You had Calvin Ridley and you motioned him into the bunch. You're literally segmenting one side of the field, and you're trying to tell me that was smarter than taking your one-on-one with Calvin he's on an island with a guy. Some of these things, like the justifications, sound smart as you're being, as it's being explained, but it doesn't make any sense. Like, bro, that doesn't make any sense. Like, we didn't kick it out of bounds because of like, bro, Khalif Raymond is taking you guys behind the shed every time you kick him the ball. And guess what? We're kicking him the ball a lot today.
Yep.
So maybe we shouldn't do that. It's just like simple things.
I'm going to have to send that clip to Khalif Raymond's mama. I think that was probably the only time Khalif has ever been compared to Devin Hester. But he looked like it on Sunday. I did too. I wish they brought him back. We've really lacked this deep threat for a very long time now, and he does it pretty well in Detroit, and he has for a multitude of years now. So that
did it good for us too. It literally made no sense.
No, it came down to money, and I don't get it. Another John Robinson miss there. Let's go back to these comments real quick. Chef Rand joining us in the comments. Yo, he said, I believe in Cali. Get him his burrow, and we're off to the racist. I believe he means races there, but Khalif was that dude. Special teams is more about personnel and effort, not about the scheme. Yes and no. I mean, you can throw as many starter caliber players you want out there in special teams, but at the end of the day, the greatest teams out there, I mean, they're not rolling out their A team on special teams.
Explain Luke Gifford then. MB's point, Luke Gifford. I mean, bro, this guy is in every single snap, like on special teams. He's going to be one of those like 53. Like, you just keep him on the 53 every year because he's a dog on not just good. He's a special teams demon. You want to talk about demons on the field? This guy gets to the ball. And so, yeah, to his point, like, effort is really big on special teams. Like, you just kind of have to have a knack for moving around the field, because when you think about it, like, yes, effort's a big thing, but when you're coaching up special teams, whenever you're kicking, like, let's just call it like gunners, or if you're, blocking in line and then you have to get off of a player to get downfield, it's like dominoes are falling as the ball gets caught, right? And being able to see the entire field and being able to be like, okay, if I move, I can manipulate where, like, there's just a sixth sense to that some guys they just have it, and some guys don't. Some guys are not meant to be on special teams. Like Nick Westbrook-Akine is a good example of a guy who was playing valuable snaps for the team, but also needed to be a contributor on special teams and found a way to do that. But there's some guys where that doesn't click. And it's like you're coaching dudes that are just not really meant to be in that position. So that's a little bit of probably what Colt is, what's happening to him right now, is that he has several guys on his unit that are just not, that just shouldn't be out there. Like Jack Gibbons is a perfect example. Like Gibbons in structure and defense is okay. I don't like him as a player, to be honest. So giving him any compliments doesn't make any sense to me. But the point is that you can have guys that are valuable, in your traditional 11 for offense and defense that don't necessarily jive well on the special teams. And I think that's not all of the story on why it's been so poor, but I think that's some of it. I think I would argue that it is equal blame on both sides, because you can't convince me that kicking to Khalif Raymond after he's been killing you all day makes sense. You just can't. You can't possibly convince me. So, yeah, I mean, all part of the plan, Jake.
Yeah. And MB does clarify in the chat. When I was saying personally, I was referring to teams having a core group of good special teamers, not necessarily using regular starters, which I would tend to agree. And I think it goes back to even the construction of the 53-man roster. And we talked about it quite intensely on this podcast, where we had a demon on special teams, Hassan Haskins, former leading tackler on special teams for the squad. And we let him go for Julius Chestnut, which, as a runner, I get it. He's a better running back out there. But at this point in time, are we trading maybe a potential uptick on the special teams unit for the 11 carries that Julius Chestnut has at this point in time? This entire what does he have? 49 yards of total offense. I mean, it just makes sense for me to have another gunner out there, to be able to have a guy that you can trust on special teams and let him go earn that pay, like a Luke Gifford. If you have two of those guys, I mean, maybe the special teams unit is an uptick and is actually one of the better ones. I mean, you're always just one player away. So,
Well, here's the thing about special teams too, is like we're not sitting here at the end of every single season going into the playoffs and then going into the Super Bowl going, this team on special teams, man, they really made a huge impact. It's like, no, you need your special teams to just not lose you the game.
Yep.
It's very simple. You kick the ball to them, you tackle them in a reasonable amount of time. When you receive the ball, you don't turn the ball over, you get a reasonable return. That's literally every single special teams unit. Just don't lose the game. That's just the goal. So the problem is that giving up 300 plus return yards on special teams is historically bad. Giving up all like the multiple turnovers and the horrible plays where you're just not getting the ball downfield, that will lose you the game in and of itself, right? And so just because the defensive unit and the offensive unit have not been playing well, I mean, you could argue that the defense has been playing well, but because the offensive unit has not been playing well and your special teams has been historically bad, that makes for an awful football team. So, yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, like the Colts Anderson situation, like who knows what you have in as a coach, by the way. Like you could be handed an awful, that's like calling for Colt Anderson's job right now is kind of like calling for, Nick Colts' job. It's like the offense hasn't been good. All right, let's get Nick out of here. And it's like, hold on. Whoa, we're only like, 7 games into this thing. Like, can we maybe put this together? So a part of me is even fine with him keeping his job even after that horrible performance, because I don't know if it's all Colt Anderson. We don't know. We've only seen him coach 7 games. He's been bad, but we don't know. So, but I think given the context of the tank, you definitely keep him. It's like not even a question. So keep the whole team, everything that's currently in place, keep it. Let's keep doing that because it's going to get us to our quarterback.
Yeah, you don't have to come out and say that you are tanking. This team is just that bad, and it's going to tank regardless. Let it do its thing.
Yep.
But let's go ahead. Let's hop into these picks for this week in the AFC South because we got a juicy lineup this week.
Look at your boy, bro.
You're moving on up from the depths of the dwellers into middle place and 1 point behind out of first. Jumping me. And then B we'll have to get his picks after we hop off this podcast. But we got Texans at Jets tonight, Thursday night matchup. Jets favored by 2 at home. Then we hop into Jacksonville at Philly. Philly over a touchdown on that point spread. And then we got Colts at Vikings, which I did. Okay, no, I did fix the graphic. Minnesota favored by 5 at home. And then we got the big one of the week, Patriots at Titans. And Titans fans, don't get used to it because I'm sure this will be the last game of the season where Tennessee is favored out there. But let's go ahead. Let's go from top to bottom, starting with this Texans-Jet matchup. Who are you taking in this Thursday night?
I can't believe the Jets are favored in this one. That's wild to me. The Jets have been playing awful football, so I can't imagine that they're going to beat a Texans team that, while they've been underperforming, you lose Stephon Diggs. Nico Collins is still on IR. I think this might be the last week of Collins on IR. I'm not sure, but it's like Tank Dell and like Robert Woods is the next guy up. I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Bobby Trees.
Yeah, the situation for the Texans is at the skill position is pretty dire, but I have them winning this football game. I think the Texans are going to win, so I would take the Texans here. I think they're going to probably. I mean, I would argue that they're definitely going to win by more than 3, but I'll take the Texans.
No, I'm in agreement here. It doesn't make sense to see the Jets favored by here, even if it is only by 2. You're basically looking at a pick 'em at that point in time. But this Jets team,
been awful, bro.
They just lost to the Patriots last week, if I remember correctly, to a Jacoby Brissett-led Patriots at that finest. So yes, I'm going Texans as well. And I don't think it'll be relatively close. It might be a low-scoring game just because of this Jets defense is very good. But I think CJ Stroud does enough to get the win here. And I'm not super sold on this Texans team by any means either, but I think they're better than the Jets, which leads us into our second matchup, Jacksonville at Philadelphia. This one is pretty straightforward to me. I think Jalen Hurts and that team, Nick Sirianni, get the job done. Jacksonville, obviously, moving on from their left tackle. I think the pass rush probably gets home. Trevor Lawrence has had a little resurgence this last couple of weeks, but I don't think it's going to be enough this Sunday to get past Philadelphia. How do you see it?
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I like the Eagles here I would take the over, to be honest. I don't know. The Eagles have just been like kind of quietly good because they've lost some games where they shouldn't have. But this is a really good football team. Like Saquon Barkley was a huge, huge piece. Adding him, giving them a dominant run game, and then of course, like the skill position players for Philly have always really been good, but especially right now in this era. So yeah, I know that the coaching situation for them is a little weird. And the Jags have looked better. Brian Thomas Jr. is as advertised. He's fantastic. And they've gotten Gabe involved a little bit. Evan Ingram's gotten involved in the offense. Not really sure what the situation with Travis Etienne is. If it's going to be Tank Bigsby full time or if he's going to be healthy enough to come back and split carries, who knows? But yeah, I mean the defense hasn't been great. And this Eagles offense is high powered. I think they're going to probably put up a bigger spread than 7.5. But yeah, I got the Eagles.
Yeah, I think they're actually without Brian Thomas. I believe he did get injured, and he might be down for a couple of weeks, if not the remainder of the season, if I remember correctly.
What?
I believe ETN did practice yesterday. I think he was a limited participant, so maybe they're getting him back. But Tank Bigsby has been holding it down, and we're talking about maybe comeback player of the year. That dude last season looked awful as a rookie. Couldn't catch a pass, and some of the worst low lights I've ever seen from a running back. And then this season, he is showing what he was at Auburn. So that is very interesting to me.
Just a little update on Brian Thomas. So the MRI revealed nothing more than a contusion. So it's
interesting.
It's not as
not
serious. Yeah, so he's considered day to day. Actually, he was a limited participant in Wednesday's practice.
That would be huge for that Jacksonville team.
Probably going to miss they'll probably hold him
I would
out
imagine
of
he missed this week. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it makes a huge difference on the end results, though, as what I'll say. Which leads us into the Colts at Vikings. Who do you have in this matchup?
I mean, I have the Vikings. I think that this Colts team is probably going to have a little bit of life. Well, okay. Where you would assume that there's always a quarterback buff whenever you put a new quarterback in. The problem is that Flacco's already played this year, and I don't think the players are exactly stoked about the benching of Anthony Richardson. And I think that they probably don't get the Joe Flacco quarterback change buff that a normal team would. So I don't think that they're necessarily going to get like an elevated level of play. The Colts have been hyper competitive in games that it feels like they shouldn't. So I would imagine that I think the 5-point spread is really interesting. I'm not sure if I would take that or not, but I do think the Vikings will cover, and I do think that they're going to win the game. So yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot to that. I think the Colts are going to be competitive in this one, but I think the Vikings are going to take it.
I tend to agree on how it plays out. I think this will be a competitive Colts team, and I think they will have a little extra juice out there. And this is a Vikings team that has gotten the job done throughout the season with Sam Darnold at the helm. I think, man, they always do this almost upset of the week on the fantasy footballers. This is my almost upset of the week. I think it's going to be a close game. I think it's going to come down to the wire. But I do ultimately think the Vikings pull it out at the very end, having it be a field goal or late last-second touchdown. So
Vikings
we're in
get
agreement.
Hawkinson back too.
That is very true. That is very true. That's big for not only them but my fantasy teams.
Same.
Who has been stuffing up my IR spot for that this season. But that brings us to the big bell of the ball. Patriots at Titans. Tennessee favored by 3.5. I can kick us off here. I think this should be a very interesting game. I think Will Levis will be starting Drake May in the concussion protocol. I think we'll have a better understanding if he'll be out there or not later today with those injury reports that come out. But if not, it's going to be Jacoby Brissett. And this is a offense that is abysmal. You look at this Titans team, and fans are not happy with what we're putting out there on the field on offense. The Patriots are that much worse, and they both have a decently good defense. So they're very similar in that right. I think the Titans could pull this off. And man, I've gone back and forth with this one a while now. I think the Titans actually do get the dub on Sunday, and I'm going 17-10. Low scoring affair. But I think Will Levis, he's going to have a couple turnovers as he always does. Hopefully he doesn't have any of the huge boneheaded ones where it turns into a pick six or a fumble in our own red zone. But I'll give it to the Titans this week, 17-10. And maybe this will get me a little bit closer back into these matchups and have me catch up with you and B Will.
Yeah, this is a trap game. It just is. Like, this is one of those stinkers where both sides are like, yeah, we could win or lose. So this one is really, really hard to predict. Titans being favored by Vegas in this one is really interesting to me, especially with the Patriots coming off of arguably their best win of the season. So I don't really understand the logic here. I think that the Patriots have the momentum going into this game. But it does feel like the Titans should be more competitive than they've been. So this is a really tough one. I think probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to go against my gut again, because going with my gut I was losing really hard early in the season with my predictions. When I started going against my gut is when I started doing well. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to tell you, my gut tells me that the Titans win this game. I think it's also going to be a low scoring, close game. Something like, 17-14 or 17-20 makes sense. But I'm actually going to take the Patriots, though, in my prediction. So I'm going to take the Patriots 20-17. So I think it's still going to be a close game. It's going to be a lower scoring game. But it does feel like the Titans defense, like, this is where they get back. There's probably probably going to be 3, 4, 5 sacks in this one by the Titans defense. If you have the Titans defense on fantasy, this might be a game that's worth starting, because it feels like this is a game that they can perform well in. So who knows? Maybe the Titans squeak this one out, but it's so close that even though my gut tells me take the Titans, I'm not going to. I'm going to take the Patriots.
Yeah. I will be cheering for your results. We both have them making 17 points. So, MB in the chat, is this Peterson's first game back in Philly? I don't know if it is or not, but it will be and I don't think it is. I think they may have played one additional time, but potential Doug Peterson revenge game on the docket. So that'll be very interesting.
I hope they do. I hope they do, by the way. I hope the Jags beat them.
Yeah, you should be cheering for the Jags to win. You should be cheering for the Colts to win. Texans, take it or leave it. You can cheer against the Texans.
Well, the Jags only because they're a team that's in contention with us.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? Like, they're a 2-win team, so they're only one game ahead of us, really. So that's why I say that.
Yeah. So it should be an interesting slate of games this Sunday. Starting out with tonight's game with the Texans. So we appreciate everybody that's hopped in the comments, which if you didn't check it out this week, make sure if you're checking this out next week, join guys like Amar and Stevie and Chris and MB and Chef Rand. We appreciate you guys hopping in these comments every single week. If you checked us out for the first time, make sure you go and subscribe down low so you can enter in that chance to win the signed Tajay Spears jersey. We are getting dang close. We'll be giving that away as soon as we hit 1,000 subscribers. I think we're about 60 away currently, getting closer by the day. But make sure you go check out Jonathan over at Esports Valiant on Twitter. Go check out his card shop that he's got going up and rolling.
Oh, yeah, baby.
Yeah. I've been checking it out, watching the Pokemon card pack openings. Go check that out. And then follow me on Twitter /XGloryDaySports. for all that additional Titans content, and we can wallow in this team together. But we will check you guys out next Thursday. Love you, mean it. Peace.